Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. It's me, your girl Sarah Donald, and this is Sarah Donald Podcast. So today we're going to be talking about something that's been making headlines lately, which is Nigeria's new tax reforms that are set to start in January 2026. Now, I know when Nigerians hear tax, the first reaction is usually worry. I mean, more payment, more stress, more government drama. But in this episode, this is not about panic. It's about clarity, right? Because what's coming isn't just about taking from people. It's about restructuring how Nigeria collects and manages money. And that affects all of us, whether you live in Nigeria or whether you're in the diaspora sending money home. Many of you that listen to me are mostly abroad, right? Working, building your lives, maybe planning to move back someday or invest in property or businesses back home. So you've probably seen the headlines and the first thought is, does this mean the government will start taxing me even though I live abroad? Now, this is exactly why I am doing this episode. I want to break it down simply, honestly, what is changing, who does it affect, and most importantly, what is it really for Nigerians that are living in the diaspora? So let's start from the beginning. When you look at Nigeria's economy, one of the biggest challenges that we've always faced is the government doesn't collect taxes effectively. Not because people do not want to pay tax, I guess, but because the system has been messy for a very long time. It's been messy, it's been confusing, and most times unfair. For years, different agencies collected tax separately, right? So some states had their own rules, others followed federal laws. It created a lot of duplication, frustration, and even corruption. Businesses often didn't know who to pay to or what exactly they were paying for. So what the government is doing now under the President Bola Ahmed Tinubu's tax reforms is basically what we call cleaning up the house. Yes, so they've passed 4 new laws to simplify and centralize tax collection. Here's the biggest change, right? The Federal Inland Revenue Service, or what we call the FRS, is being replaced with something called the Nigerian Revenue Service, which is NRS. Now, what's the difference? The NRS will not just handle tax collection, it will also handle non-tax revenue. So things like levies, duties, and other government income. So it's an attempt to bring everything under one organized umbrella. So instead of having different offices chasing people around for payment, the idea is to make the system fairer, simpler, and most importantly, more transparent. Another reason behind this change is fairness. In the past, the same people, mainly workers and small business owners, carried the weight of taxation, while large companies and wealthy individuals found loopholes. Now, the reform is supposed to create a balance where everyone contributes based on what they earn, not who you know or who you don't know. You know what I mean? And that's important because according to the government, only about 13 million Nigerians currently pay any form of tax out of the population of over 200 million. That means the burden has been fallen on very few people. Yes. So by reforming the system, Nigeria is trying to widen the base, not necessarily to make you pay more, but to make sure that those who have been skipping taxes are finally brought to book. Now, before you start thinking, this means more bill, let me explain something. The government also introduced relief measures for low-income earners and small businesses. We'll get into that next. But for now, let's talk about what this means for regular Nigerians, like the market women, the freelancers, small business owners, and even people just trying to survive like day to day. Now, under the new laws, if you earn less than 1 million naira a year, you won't have to pay personal income tax. In some states, the limit might even go up to 1.2 million, depending on the final structure. Now, that's a big deal, right? It means the poorest Nigerians, the ones who earn the least, are being officially exempted. Now, for small businesses, it's similar. If your business makes less than 100 million in annual tax revenue, you will not be charged corporate income tax. That's aimed at encouraging small and medium enterprises because they are the backbone of Nigerians' economy, let's face it. And for those earning more than that, tax rates are being adjusted so that they are fairer and easier to calculate. So there is a clear focus on making essential goods and services more affordable. So things like basic food items, educational materials, transportation will be exempt from the VAT, meaning the prices will not increase, or rather the prices shouldn't increase. just because of tax. Now, this is actually one of the few times we're seeing tax reform with a pro-poor message in Nigeria. Usually, tax conversations in this country are about raising revenue, right? But this one actually includes protection for those who can least afford new costs. Now, let's be real. No reform is perfect. There will always be challenges with implementation, but this new policy tries to clean the messy parts of the system. So, for example, before now, you might see multiple government agencies asking one business to pay similar tasks, one from the federal government, one from the state, another from the local government. That's what they call multiple taxation, and it's one of the biggest killers of Nigerian businesses. Now, the new laws are supposed to reduce that. Everything will be streamlined under one umbrella, which is the Nigerian Revenue Service, with a joint revenue board managing federal and state coordination. Now, the hope is that this will create more transparency, right? So when you pay, you actually know where your money is going. So for ordinary Nigerians, this could mean fewer random levies, fewer government people showing up at your business gate, demanding payments, and hopefully less corruption in the process. So while it's okay to be cautious, right, it's important to see that this reform is trying to fix a business that was long overdue for change. Now let's get into the part most of you have been waiting for: how all this affects Nigerians in the diaspora. So I know many of you are working abroad in the UK, the US, Canada, Dubai, or wherever you're settled, but your heart and your money are still in Nigeria. You send money home, you invest, maybe you've even bought a land or you own properties, or you're even planning to relocate soon. So you've probably seen news headlines about Nigerians' tax laws and wondered, does this mean the government will start taxing me even though I live abroad? Now, let's make this clear right away. If you live abroad and you earn your income abroad, Nigeria cannot tax you that foreign income. Yes, that's because of what is called double taxation agreement. Now, Nigeria has this with several countries to prevent citizens from being taxed twice on the same income. That's because of what's called double taxation agreement. Nigeria has this agreement with several countries to prevent citizens from paying double tax on the same income. So you just pay the tax of where you currently live, right? So your salary earned in the UK, for example, isn't going to be taxed again by Nigeria. So now if you invest in Nigeria, say you have rental property, a business, or dividends from a business or a company in Nigeria, that's a different story. Any income generated inside Nigeria is taxable under the Nigerian law. Now, that's the same rule that applies almost everywhere in the world. If a British or American citizen earns income in Nigeria, right, Nigeria taxes that portion. If a Nigerian earns income abroad, that country taxes from them, right? Does that make sense? If you send money home just for your family to pay rent, school fees, upkeep, that is not tax. Nigeria government has made that clear, right? Because this also helps the economy. Actually, this is one area where Nigeria benefits greatly. The diaspora sends billions of dollars every year. According to the World Bank, Nigeria receives over $20 billion annually from Nigerians abroad, and that money supports millions of families. So no, the Nigerian government is not going to tax you on that. They want that flow to continue. Now, where the reform will touch you is if you start investing. So for example, you're running a small logistics business in Lagos while living in London, and you're renting out an apartment in Abuja. In that case, you will need to declare that income under Lagos tax law. But again, this doesn't mean paying extra. It just means you now have clearer systems to pay the correct amount without harassment or confusion. Now, another benefit of these reforms is the transparency, right? So with the new Nigerian Revenue Service, the government says you'll be able to pay or declare taxes online, track your record, get official receipts, something that used to be very difficult for people abroad to manage remotely. So if there's something you've been thinking about, how do I stay up to date with my tax without being in Nigeria, that new structure actually will help you. The truth is that this isn't a punishment for Nigerians abroad. It's an invitation to stay connected legally and confidently. Now let's move into another group that will really feel these reforms. I'm talking about investors and business owners. Now, if you have ever tried to start or run a business in Nigeria, you already know how complicated the tax system can be. There were so many agencies, levies, random fees that sometimes get like they're not even accounted for, so you get confused. Now, this new reform is trying to fix that. One of the biggest changes is that with small businesses with less than 100 million in yearly turnover are now exempt from corporate income tax. Yeah, so that's a major shift. It means that if you're running a small logistics company, a firm, a restaurant, a creative agency, an online store, and your annual sales are below 100 million, you do not need to pay the corporate income tax. Now, if you're earning more than that, your tax rate depends on your size, but the process is now being streamlined under one authority, so there is less confusion about who you're paying to. Now, here's something else, right? The asset threshold for small businesses has also been adjusted. So if your company's assets are below 250 million naira, you fall into the small business category and get those same exemptions. Does that make sense? Let's say you're a Nigerian living abroad and you started a fashion line or tech startup back home. As long as you're still under the 100 million naira mark, you're exempt from corporate income tax. Now, this reform also aimed to help stop multiple taxation. I mean, the nightmare where local councils, state government, and the federal government all demand different payments for the same business. Under the new structure, there'll be a joint revenue board which will coordinate taxes across different levels of government. Now, that's supposed to simplify things dramatically and make it easier to comply without being overcharged. Now, if you're planning to invest in Nigeria, especially in real estate, agriculture, or manufacturing, this is where things get a little bit more interesting. Now, the government wants more investors to bring money home, so they are offering clear tax rules and incentives. So, for example, if you invest in sectors that create jobs or promote local production, you could qualify for tax holidays or rebates under certain conditions. So this isn't just about the government collecting more money. It's about making it easier for us to do businesses in Nigeria. Yes, there will still be challenges here and there. Nigeria's bureaucracy isn't going to disappear overnight, but this is a sign that the government is at least thinking of trying to simplify things and make the environment a better place for us to run our businesses. Now, if you're someone who's been hesitant to start a business because of the wahala from tax office, you might just find the new structure more approachable. Now, let's talk about my favorite part, which is property, because a lot of Nigerians abroad are investing in land and housing back home. First, let's make something clear. Owning properties in Nigeria doesn't automatically mean you will pay the new tax under this new reform. What exists and will continue to is property tax and land use tax, which are not new. These are typically state levy charges, meaning they depend on where your property is located. So, for example, Lagos has its own land use charge, Abuja has its own property rates, and other states set theirs differently. So, the 2026 tax reform doesn't add a new property tax. No, it only improves how the government tracks and collects the existing one. So, if you have already paid land use charge or property rates annually, nothing major has changed. You will just likely have a clearer digital process for payment in the future. Now, here's where people get confused when you rent out your property. Now, if you have tenants and you earn rent from your tenants in Nigeria, that rent is considered income generated in Nigeria. And yes, it can be taxed. But again, it's not new. What is new now is that the system will be centralized, meaning instead of local officers showing up at your gate demanding payment, you will deal directly with the official channels. So for property owners in the diaspora, this could actually make your life easier. You can handle things online and avoid this middleman, which causes a lot of corruption and all that. And they usually inflate all those things and collect fees on behalf of the government. Now, another positive change is the focus on documentation. The reforms encourages clearer ownership registration, record keeping, which could help protect diaspora Nigerians from what? land scams, and disputes. Now, if you've ever heard stories of people losing money they paid for or having fake documents issued, the reform indirectly helps with that by tightening the digital records through tax and revenue system. So again, if you're Nigerian abroad with properties back home, you're not suddenly going to face new taxes. No, you just have more organized processes and possibly better protection for your assets. Now, let's bring this closer home, or rather to your pockets, because no matter how beautiful the policies sound, the first question on most people's mind is, will things get more expensive? And the short answer is some things might, but not everything. So now let's start with VAT, which is the value added tax. The current VAT rate is 7.5%. And while there have been talks about adjusting it slightly, the government still hasn't confirmed at the time of this video. However, what is changing is the efficiency of how it is collected. That means you probably notice VAT being more consistently applied, especially on goods and services that used to slip through the cracks. So for example, when you pay for a hotel, a restaurant, or certain online services, the VAT charge will now be automatic. But here's something most people don't know. Basic food items, rent, medical service, and educational services remain VAT exempt. So that's written into Nigerian tax law and has not changed with this reform. So while luxury spending might feel a pinch, right? Let's say imported drinks or high-end electronics, essential items will not suddenly jump in price because of tax reforms. So now let's talk about fuel, transport, general living, and all that, right? Now, since the subsidy removal in 2023, prices have already gone up. So this reform doesn't directly increase those costs, but what it does affect how the government earns revenue and ideally how the revenue is used. So the plan, according to the Federal Ministry of Finance, is that with better tax collection, there will be more funds available for infrastructure, health, and education without always running to borrow money. So while you may not feel the benefit overnight, the long-term idea is to make government spending more sustainable, less borrowing, more accountability. Now, I know Nigerians have heard that line many times before. Better governance is coming and people are slightly skeptical, but this reform is structured differently because it introduces transparency tools and data integration, meaning it will be easier for citizens to track what has been collected and where it's actually going. So for those of you abroad thinking of returning, the general cost of living might feel higher than what you left behind, but that's due to inflation and exchange rates, not specifically the tax reform. Again, no need to panic. This isn't a new tax for everything situation. It's more of a clean-up process, right? Now let's come out a bit. Every country that has successfully grown its economy did so through a strong tax system, not necessarily high tax, but fair and reliable taxes. Now, the truth is, Nigeria's tax to GDP ratio is one of the lowest in Africa, around 10% compared to countries like South Africa, which is around 28%. Nigeria collects far less tax relative to the size of its economy. So this reform isn't just about punishing citizens. No, it's about closing loopholes, making big corporations actually pay their fair tax, while small businesses and ordinary people are protected. So for Nigerians abroad, it's also an opportunity to see the country modernize a little, because when a country's tax system gets organized, it often signals broader progress, digitalization, accountability, and investor confidence. And it opens doors. It means the Nigerians in the diaspora can invest more confidently, own assets without fear of random levies, and maybe even retire home without worrying about unclear obligations. So that's a long-term goal and is one worth watching out for. Yeah. So what you can do right now, especially if you're abroad or planning to move back, here are some practical steps. The first step is to stay informed. Follow updates from the Federal Inland Revenue Service, which is the FIRS, and the new Nigeria Revenue Service. Now, once it fully launches, they will release guidelines on who needs to register and what's exempt. Now, the second one will be to keep your records. If you own a property, a business, or receive rent in Nigeria, keep all your documents, your receipts, your tenancy agreement, bank statements, because the new system rewards transparency, right? Now, the third one will will be to use official channels only. Avoid anyone saying, I can help you fix your tax, or I know someone in the office. That's how scams start. The goal of the reform is to eliminate middleman. And the fourth one is to consult a professional, especially if you have investments or dual income, which is home and abroad. A licensed accountant, a tax consultant in Nigeria can help you stay compliant without paying unnecessary fees. And the fifth one will be do not panic. Plan. These reforms will be rolled out gradually. No one's coming after individuals overnight, but understanding what's changing helps you, work smarter, save smarter, just helps your finances. Now, for my Nigerians in the diaspora, take advantage of online tax portals once they are live. It will save you time and you can pay or verify compliances without being physically present in Nigeria. So to wrap this up, change always brings anxiety, especially in a country where people don't always trust the system. But this particular reform, if it's done right, could actually benefit both Nigerians at home and abroad. It's not about taxing you for living abroad or taking your hard-earned money. It's about fixing a broken structure so that people know what to pay, when to pay, and whom, without harassment or confusion. So as Nigerians, whether we are home or abroad, we all want the same thing: a country that works, a system that is fair, and a leadership that is accountable. So while you stay abroad, keep sending love home, keep investing, keep learning. And when you do return, you will be stepping into a more organized Nigeria. So I hope. Now, this is Sarah Donald, and you've been listening to Understanding Nigeria 2026 Tax Reforms, what Nigerians abroad need to know. Thank you and stay blessed.